Welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I am Nerder Doug, and tonight I am going to see what I can see with this nerd.
Ruckus Dave, hey, what's going on?
Nothing, just another Monday night, the best day of the week because it's a fresh start of Nerdarchy stuff. We got new videos, we got a live chat, we get to talk to you,
I don't
fellow
know.
nerds.
I don't know what the best day of the week is for me. I mean, Saturday nights is typically our D&D night and in person, so I've always been partial to Saturday nights.
Sure.
But and now that we don't, record those games and put them on the internet, we just keep them to ourselves. So
When you set your sight on the past, how long has Saturday night been your D&D night? I mean, I know
oh
you
my
take
god,
like
since my
weeks
early
off.
20s.
Really? So like over like almost 30 years or
Um
25 years.
well, let's see. I just had a birthday and turned 47. I think. Yeah, 47.
Yeah, so like 25 years. It's your silver anniversary.
And it was like between I don't remember exactly when we started. I would have say like 21, 22. So yeah, right around 25. I mean, granted that wasn't like continuous. There was
Yeah.
definitely a period where we're like, we would not game for a couple months and then we'd get the band back together and
Hmm.
but for the longest time, I would say for like a solid like 5 years, we
Man,
had that thing going.
lucky. Yeah, Saturday is like the best day for D&D gaming, I think. Even as a
Yeah.
little kid or like all the times I've enjoyed it most. It's just like, yep, Saturday, nobody's got anything to do except play some D&D. So
Yeah.
yeah, tonight we're talking about sight, which I think you were inspired by our chat about sound last week. I thought, why don't we do sight? We did
Well, I
vision
was
and
actually
light a while.
anti-inspired at first, if I'm going to be perfectly
Oh,
honest.
really?
Yeah, because at
Didn't you
first,
propose it?
well, I did, but so here's the thing. Here's the evolution, right?
Okay.
First, you guys did sound. So a lot of times, if there's a duplicity, what is it?
Duality.
Duality to something, we'll usually cover, both sides of it. Or, if we're doing elements, we might as well do all four, whatever the case may
Right.
be. But I was like, I don't know if there's really anything to do with sight. But then I started thinking about it, and there's something, things just started
Okay.
popping in my head.
Percolating.
A couple of them from Doctor Who. We were talking
Oh
about
yeah.
that Bird Box show on
Oh
Netflix.
yeah. That's right.
Yeah, so you had the silence in Doctor Who, which was like these aliens that like when you're looking at them, you know whatever you know, but as soon as you look away, you would forget about them.
Okay.
So and they could like implant suggestions, so they're just like wrecking society and stuff, but no one could remember them. And then there was, then there is the weeping angels, which is like if you don't look at them, they can't move if you look at them, but they move so fast that if you even blink, like they're just about there. So
Ooh.
so I was like, maybe there is some interesting topics we could cover using sight.
Yeah, both those things would be interesting encounters in D&D for sure, site-based in two different ways.
Yeah, yeah. And then, but before we go any further, I do want to take a moment to shout out to our sponsor, Easy Roller Dice. If it's your first set of dice or your 1 millionth set of dice, Easy Roller Dice for all your dice rolling needs. We got a coupon code down in the description below. If it's for your first order, and it is like 25% off. So if you want some dice, go pick up some Easy Roller Dice, and they also have got a bunch of cool ones as well. So
Yeah, if you're going to start playing a new character, maybe go check out and get some dice that are themed for them. I do that all the time.
some gemstone dice, some metal dice.
Oh, gemstone dice are so cool.
Yeah, so I really got to thinking, and before we got started, I pulled up D&D Beyond. And I'm like, "Where's some monsters with gaze attacks?
Oh yeah, I didn't think of
Where
that.
the very attack they use against you becomes a weapon itself." And there's quite a few. There's quite a few of them, and I probably don't even have them all. But I just did a quick search,
I
and
mean, there's the classic Medusa, of course, that comes to mind first. Basilisks, right?
yep, and
Anything jump out that you were like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, or like,
oh
what's
yeah,
that?
two of them, and two of them are they're monsters I've used often enough, and one
Okay.
being the Nothic,
Oh
which
yeah, it has a rotting gaze, I believe, right?
yeah, it does necrotic damage and is basically necrosis. Anything
Yeah.
you
Ugh, gross. Man.
it is gross, but also Nothic is one of my favorite 5e monsters, I must say.
Yeah.
I think they're new, right? They weren't in previous editions.
I'm not sure, but you have like a savant like knowledge of D&D monsters.
It only applies to that. Anything else, I'm freaking useless. So, and then there's the Yeti with their chilling gaze, which I do love me some Yetis.
Oh yeah, Yetis are so cool.
I've used them, and then the Bodak. The Bodak has a death gaze.
Oh yeah. And I think it came around in 3E. I ended up on that site we were just talking about before we came
Oh
in.
yeah. But yeah, Nothic's definitely, they've got like some of the freaking coolest lore.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and just a great visual with the giant eye. It's just, yeah, pretty sweet. Yeah, you had much more expansive, imaginative ideas than me for sure, which is cool. My first thought was just like, well, phrases that come to mind are like line of sight. That's a big thing
Yeah.
in D&D, which we can get to. But I'm really curious about all these monsters with the gaze attacks. That's not cool. Like, do you have any stories from your games? I certainly do about it. One particular.
So like I said, I've used Nothics quite a few times. And I actually like using them as NPCs more than monsters to fight.
So they wear hats.
I have not put any hats on them yet.
Oh, isn't that the universal signal?
It is usually my
you can
go-to.
interact with me.
It's the go-to, right? There's no exclamation above their head in my games generally, but if they're wearing a hat, there's a good chance that you can talk with them and they will not try and just eat your face automatically.
Yeah, the giant Nothic though,
yes,
if I recall, right?
Yeah, Crystal was a Murphy McCrystaltop.
Yep.
I didn't name him. One of the Gobblos did, and they were insane. So
blame it on them.
But that came from an adventure I had written for. I think I've run it as a one shot for fans in the past, and maybe even on the channel. But I'd written it to use for Philly Games Con and Trouble with Prospectors. So
okay.
It was two different factions of Chaos Crystal prospectors, and one of them had a secret weapon in their arsenal for tracking the chaos magic, the chaos storms, and it was the Nothic, because Nothic has this. I don't think it's a mechanic. It's just a part of their lore that they just have this ability.
That's why that lore's there, to give DMs like, oh, that's magic. Interesting.
So like, during one of these chaos storms, there's a conflict that breaks out between the different factions of prospectors, and part of the deal too is, the players would each be part of one faction or the other, and it didn't matter. They could choose, and they didn't have to be the same. And as the dispute kind of starts, the chaos storm breaks out, and the Nothic gets struck by a chaos lightning bolt and makes it mutate. It grows to the size of a giant, and grows all of these crystalline protrusions out of it, and big enough where it can scoop up a person in each hand, and it takes the leader of each of the factions and runs off. But as an after effect of the chaos magic, where it goes everywhere in its wake is being affected by the chaos magic until it wears off. And and it's funny too, because like the players were like the ones that had chosen the side that were using the Nothic, they're like, wait a minute, we're the jerks in this situation because we've enslaved this creature and just use it to track chaos magic. Like they kept it in a metal box and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were not particularly good to it, so it was justifiably angry.
You love that concept of just like chaos crystals and storms and stuff, huh?
Well, I mean, we did like build our world around it, sort of.
Well, so then, yeah. Probably wouldn't have done that if you don't like that.
Yeah. So but that being said, like that NPC then, because of that encounter, existed just outside of the town, and later on, the players in a different group needed something, so they went and negotiated with him to get it, or I think maybe he was rampaging,
Hmm.
and they kind of talked him down and convinced him to live someplace, and they started bringing him gifts and stuff so that he would not, so he would stop rampaging.
Okay.
Uh, and he just became a part of that. He became a part of that campaign for a while. Like the Juggalos definitely liked going back to him, and then later on they had to build a bomb, a magic bomb basically,
Hmm.
and they used a ritual involving his necrotic gaze in order to power it. So
Okay.
it became kind of like a big part of that campaign.
Yeah. They have two sort of sight-based things too. Not only the riding gaze, but they have a weird insight that is a pretty cool ability that you can just basically, if you fail a save, they learn a secret that you have to tell them, which is
So,
pretty cool. And
yeah,
also, like, again, it's kind of sort of like DM inspirational, is that they just know a lot of stuff. And I think it says that in the lore as well.
yeah.
That
That's
they
why
just
I think they make a better. They actually make a better monster to have your players interact with them fight.
oh, for sure.
I mean, they're super cool, and but then they also have this mechanically they're cool to use to have them fight your players, but like that other stuff is just so much more interesting than what you can do with that. So I also think I used them in the Minotaur adventure where we had the Spelljammer Minotaur in one of those where
Yeah,
what
what
is
is
it?
that called?
Where in the ritual they Horus the Hornlord.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I like they get the books for that ritual from a Nothic, and that kind of led them to that adventure.
Right. There's a Nothic right in Fandelver pretty early on. It's just like, you encounter it fairly early in the adventure, almost certainly. And yeah, totally. Like every time I've played that adventure, which is not a ton, but probably like 3 or 4 times already. Uh,
That
the
seems like a
you
party
know,
wipe for a low level adventures.
yeah, but like everybody wants to talk to it, and like
Yeah,
because it is
he's
interesting. It's like they don't just like they're not just like feral creatures; they just attack on sight. So even though they look scary and everything.
they got it. They had that like golem esque quality
Yeah,
to them.
yeah, that's a good analogy.
And I think like when I voiced them that like I kind of like go with that kind of aesthetic. I mean, I don't do tons of
Come to think of it,
voices.
other times I've played it, that DMs did that too. That yeah, yeah, in some way, like you know, it's like
They just have that aesthetic to them where
sure.
they just feel like because they're also cursed too, right? Like that's part of their lore.
Hmm. Yeah, and they want to cure it. Like that's why they're seeking magical knowledge and things like that.
So yeah, that of all of the site based ones, that one's probably my favorite. Now I've used Yetis quite a few times, and also Yetis are kind of fun too because like when you want a monster this is going to surprise your PCs, beat on them, hit them with a chilling gaze, and then maybe beat feed or whatever. Like you're not
Hmm.
really going to reason with Yetis, I don't think.
Yeah, and that can be a really scary encounter if you not only does it have a sight based attack, but like really sell like the sight of what it would be like to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like it's obviously going to be in a snowy area, so it's just like you could kind of set it up of just like, yeah, it's like your visibility is low, it's like super snowy, maybe they can only see so far or whatever, there's
Well,
difficult
yeah, and that's
terrain,
also a
and
really
they
good
just
point.
boom hits them with a chilling gaze because it's like you just come upon it. Maybe you could have them just use their passive perception or something like that if you want to get mechanical about it, and give them a chance, and maybe they would just be like, yeah, you see just like a vague shadowy large in the snow ahead of you, and then all of a sudden like boom, make a save, like a wisdom, what is probably wisdom save,
Well,
and with
I would say too, like it's really one of the iconic scenes from any of the novels is like the Mithril Hall trilogy. The very or yeah, is it Streams of Silver? Is that the first one?
that is a book. I don't know.
Whatever the first one is, like the book opens with Dritz getting waylaid by a Yeti.
Oh, that's Crystal Shard. That's the very
Crystal
first
Shard,
thing.
yeah.
Streams of
So
Silver was the second,
so
or
it's
maybe it was Halfling Gem. Anyways,
but yeah, so it opens with that. So that's pretty
yeah.
like iconic, right? And like, you know, having read that, I think it's like great inspiration from the DM, like you said, where like in that case it was like Dritz being snow blinded from the sun reflecting off the snow and him being a
Mhm.
drow. But you know, you could do the same thing with a storm, you know, with a
Yeah.
yeah, you could have
Yeah,
it,
it's all how you sell the sizzle as a DM. I mean, if you just said like, yeah, you know, you're walking along and a Yeti, you know, attacks you. I mean, that's pretty boring. You know what I mean?
yeah. But you know,
Um,
and for you know, for the characters with that like uber insane you know, perception check that's like in the
yeah.
20s, you can whittle that right down, you know, with
Hmm.
a you know, with a snowstorm, that's got to be at least disadvantage. That's a
Yeah, that's why I
95.
mentioned the mechanical stuff because I know a lot of people, you know, get into like they want to like you know do the math basically, and
Yeah.
I find it somewhat interesting to you know I might not like plan all that out, but just for my own curiosity, it's just like well how hard would that be? And that's a cool way to reward those characters that like you know like eyes or something where it's like well that's why I did that so that I don't get waylaid by Yetis and you know maybe it's not useful like in the midst of combat to invest that much in your alertness but it certainly helps in those situations or it's an awesome opportunity for like a ranger to shine you know if they happen to be their specialty. I did notice there's a question in chat which is always great. If anybody has questions throw them out, they were happy to answer. This is from the Great Movie War, who I believe is a newcomer to the chat. Welcome. I am an online DM, and I was thinking about adding a Watcher entity, probably like the MC, like Marvel Comics and cinematic, what if, that would pretty much teleport players from one area to another if a player did not show up the last week. Is that appropriate? I think that's totally appropriate. I love theme campaigns. Uh, you know, that's a fun way of handling it, I think, and just, you know, delving into like the fantastical elements of things. I would say I would play a campaign where that just happened. That was the premise of the
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
It's just like, yep, every time we play, you know,
Yeah,
this a watcher like entity is just going to send us where we need to go for the adventure. It could be anywhere.
it's a built-in quest giver, you know, so
Yeah,
things like that can make it easy. And or you know, almost like it actually just makes me think of the D&D cartoon where you like
yeah.
it's like the dungeon master character, but you know, you can use,
It's
you
like if
know,
you're this powerful, why don't you just do it for us? Why are we
yeah,
putting ourselves in mortal danger?
then you just got to get a spiel about gives the spiel about I am just here to watch. So,
Yeah, but that's a great thing to you know. Just again, like we always say, just to talk about in your session zero. Just like, hey, does everybody think that's a cool thing? You know, maybe people, and I'm sure if the players get on board, they'll probably throw out some ideas that'll make it even cooler for you too. Like, oh, I didn't think of that.
yeah, Zargon mentioned something that I actually forgot about at this point. We had a player that was in that we wouldn't show up nearly as frequent as the others.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other player, so he was cursed and trapped on a magic item that would suck him in and spit him out randomly. So you know,
Okay.
if he showed up, then his character would be there. If not, he was in the item. I've seen other groups do that too, so I don't think it's like a super unique thing. I know when I
Mm-hmm.
played with Timmy on Twitch, they had a gem that the party carried that whoever didn't show up for the evening got sucked into the gem.
What character did you play in that? Wasn't that like some kind of competition sort of adventure? Like there was different teams or something like that.
Oh no, that was
Do you remember that? Wasn't that with TV Timmy?
no, it was. I know he ended up in a. You know, I was there for like 2 to 4 sessions. I don't remember.
Ah,
He's like, "Hey, can you do a guest appearance for a one shot?" And 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 I was like, sure. And then it turned into like more like a mini series. But I don't remember. That was a couple years ago.
Oh, look at me.
I just know I did play the Unearthed Arcana Stone Sorcerer.
Okay. That was fun. I was really surprised that didn't wind up somewhere.
It was a
pretty
good
cool.
one. And
Yeah.
also, maybe it was too good. And then when you combined it with the Hill Dwarf, it was like super tanky.
Well, it should be. That's totally appropriate for a Hildorf Stone Sorcerer. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
They should be super tanky. So I had in my Spelljammer campaign one time, they were running down. It was one of those things where like they were on a quest, and to get to move forward on what they were doing, they had to help somebody else complete their quest, which was solve a murder. And they tracked down the killers who ran off to their asteroid base where they went. And I just used, I think it was one of the elemental cults from, what's that called? Princes of the Apocalypse, because it just was a cool map, and it was like, oh, it's all rocky, so I was like, it's an asteroid or whatever. And I just used it, like the monsters that were in there and everything. I even called them, they were like the Black Earth cult, like gang or something like that. And spoilers if you want to play like a probably 8-year-old adventure now, which is really fun. I know it gets a lot of hate, but
it's completely different because yours was on an asteroid.
Yeah, right. So like many dungeons, there's like sort of the way that you would go through it. The boss is at the end, and the boss is a Medusa, and in his chamber he has an escape thing that's just supposed to be like, that's how he goes in and out all the time, Well, they spent so much time like sneaking in carefully and searching all around the first room that they found that where it comes out, because they were like casting spells. They just were like taking so many precautions. So they snuck in and just popped out in the boss's chamber. Now, like any D&D adventure, there's tons of telegraphing, like there's very realistic looking statues and stuff like before you get there, so okay, I know what that means, right? But they just popped right out and surprised the Medusa, who has like an artifact weapon and stuff, and they were just, they had already, like, one of the characters is a warlock, so of course, like I said, yeah, they cast spells. It's like, well, he was already down with one of the 2 spell slots he had, right? So it was tough. It was him, a monk, and a dwarf cleric, and an elf fighter. And man, they were putting their screws to it. And I was like real upfront where I was like, gaze, if you say, you're averting your gaze, and blah, 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 I explained it. And like every turn, everybody was like, yeah, I'm making sure to avert my gaze. And I was like, okay. And the one turn, the character or the player just didn't say that. And so I was like, okay. And so he had to make a save, and he missed it by more than 5, and he just turned to stone. And they were all like, but, I haven't averted my gaze every other turn. I'm like, I know, and you said you were, but I was like, that time you didn't. So, I mean, he's like, but I meant to. I'm like, hey, man, that's D&D, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole long, like I've told that story a million times, how they got out of that.
Sometimes you just gotta turn them to stone.
Yep, which was pretty interesting because they were like, how does he weigh more now? And I was like, I don't know. And I looked up petrified, and it's like, yeah, you weigh 8 times what you did, or something like that, or whatever. It was like a ridiculous amount. And then they were like, they're all weak and stuff. Like that, the fighter was like a dex fighter and stuff. And they're like, we can't even lift it, man. And we're like, deep in this thing and stuff. And they couldn't get it. It was, back through the passage for sure. So they had to fight their way out. Like through all the guys, it was crazy. And nobody said, and they left the artifact thing there too. Nobody said they picked it up.
Son of a monkey's uncle.
the other,
I just envision, well, we're going to have to cut them up into smaller pieces so we can carry them out. Don't worry, we'll mark them so we put you back together.
Now the warlock made a special deal with his patron. He like reached out to him that he was like, I'll do anything, if you unpetrify him. And it was like, all right, well then, the thing that they were actually trying to do, that they were solving this to go continue doing, he wanted him and the petrified guy to thwart that from happening, because it was actually like detrimental to the patron itself. And they did, and nobody ever knew. Like the rest of the party, they thought, I told you about that, where they like blew up half the back of their escape ship. Oops. And jettisoned that thing that they went to get all that trouble to get. And everybody's like, oh man, that sucks, but like you had to do it because you know it was the only way to get away. And they were like, yeah, it sucks. It's great. The other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just looking at the chat. It's got a couple questions popping
Sure.
up.
Oh, cool.
Zargon, would you prefer blind sight out to 30 feet or devil sight out to 200 feet? And what eye color? Go blind sight and no eyes.
You mean like in real life?
I don't know.
What's the difference? I mean, devil sight is like you can just see in darkness as if it's dim light or normal light.
Normal. You can see it. It's normal.
And blind sight is what you just sense everything, like Daredevil. Basically,
you don't. Yeah, basically, yeah, Daredevil.
Well, I don't know. I guess blind sight sounds cooler than devil sight, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, devil sight you can see in the dark. I mean, if you're talking in the real world, then devil sight is less cool because there's no magical darkness to see through. but in the game, right? In the game, there is magical darkness, so there's that. But blind sight is pretty cool. You know what? Too, like, Ted ran a dungeon. That jerk. That had nothing. It was nothing but magical darkness that couldn't be seen through. I don't know if anybody had devil sight. Even if there was, he probably wasn't allowing it. And so we had to do the whole thing blind. The only thing is the rogue had, whatever sense they get, but it's only
blind sense.
10 feet.
Yeah.
And like that's when you realize how many of your spells are based on being able to see a creature. Yeah,
a creature you can see within range and stuff like that. Yeah, one of our modules in the store, the Gaze of the Void Eye, is like that. I mean, it's just like that is the premise. It's like it's dark here. You know, I don't remember exactly the mechanics of it, but it's like nothing works. Like you just can't see. Yeah, devil sight doesn't matter. Dark vision doesn't matter.
And like we'd have to do things like I remember with my character, I would walk and like trace the wall, for most of it, and that's like kind of like we had to do. I think it's cool to kind of do things like that occasionally, just
for sure.
Yeah, to make the players think and do something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got a shout out from New Zealand. Hey, Dinomancer, what's going on?
Cool.
How are things down under? Or down next to under, I guess.
Let's see.
Great movie War. I know Spelljammer deals with space, but should space be treated as another plane? Because I was thinking about during a campaign to have a space invasion on Earth. Well, so space invasions have been in D&D since the very beginning, right? The Gith, the Mind Flayers, Aboliths, all of those are kind of like part of that.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what they're doing with Spelljammer, although the books just came today. I haven't opened any of them.
Oh man, I'm so jelly of you.
So they're both, they're sealed, right? They're both the slipcases and they're sealed. And Wednesdays we shoot videos, so hopefully they've been sending books to both me and Ted. So if he gets a set too, then we'll be able to kind of do a quick overview. I mean, we only have a day to kind of look through them, so it's not like it's going to be exhaustive. But we can poke around. I'm kind of curious about the monster book and what's in the player's guide. You got the adventure. It looks really cool. But we never really played Spelljammer in our games. So I think you have a better understanding of Spelljammer than I do.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, first, should space be treated as another plane? So in the 5e iteration that's coming out, it's sort of both. You fly up into space, which is just like our own space. And there's, like the helm keeps the ship safe and all that. But anyway, when you fly out far enough, like say beyond your solar system, then you're in the astral sea, which is another plane. And that's what you're traveling through until you get to places where you filter into their actual space, which is called wild space. Back in the day, it was like the original version. There was space like you knew it, like essentially like our solar system, our solar system would be enclosed in a gigantic crystal sphere. and there was like all kind of spells like open sphere portal and stuff. So like when you got to the edge of it, you had to go through it somehow, and it would open a portal big enough for your ship to go through. And then you went into what was called the phlogiston, which was this multicolored, extremely flammable gas that flowed, and all the crystal spheres floated in that. And there was like, like rivers, so to speak, of like quicker ways, maps of like how to get to, Forgotten Realms from Dragonlance, and there was all kind of noodly rules about like, well, if the ship's this big, then the cubic feet of air on that it produces is this and that. I looked back at it a few years ago. I was like, yeah, I didn't do any of that when I was a kid, and I still don't now, and I highly doubt they'll have it be that convoluted and like calculus and stuff, basically in the 5e version. But real simply, I would say in your game, you can treat it however you want. It could be another plane just like past the clouds. I mean, we're already breaking laws of physics. There's like giants who live on the clouds. So it's just like,
Yeah, what's one more thing? So we used to run a annual yearly Thanksgiving Eve game that was Spelljammer. I mean, Spelljammer-esque, right? Like, we would call it Spelljammer, and we had spelljamming vessels, but that's about it, right? It was just themed. It was essentially we were playing D&D in space because that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll get into. So we're gonna get into the Spelljammer and take a look at that and see what they got in there. I mean, Spelljammer always was good for coming up with really weird, cool monsters. I believe that's where we got the gift from, which is come on, hippo people that speak with an English accent and use black powder weapons. What more could you possibly want?
Yeah, for sure. It's kooky fun. Let's see. Somebody mentioned something that I wanted to get. It was on my points too. Let's see. What's the deal with True Sight? It's Dynamancer from New Zealand. We have a PC in a game at the moment who has a headband of True Sight. The DM doesn't know how to respond most of the time. Now, is that the same? Is that what that one invocation granted you, True Sight, that you guys were talking about?
Oh, yeah. True Sight just lets you see through. True Sight lets you see how things really are.
Yeah, and that's a DM's like I would love that.
Well, yes and no, right? Like, if you're trying to run any kind of subterfuge in your game, and this is now in the game, and you weren't expecting it, but you're the DM, so how did they get it, right? But
they could have ran that roll on a random treasure chest.
But that being said, like there's been plenty. Like I don't think that's an item, right? That sounds like custom. I'm not remembering anything off the top of my head. But True Sight lets you see through all illusions, see things that are shape changed. And like you said, we did talk about the invocation that the Warlock did, but they don't get it to like 15th level. And I guess that's like the big difference too, depending on your level when you get it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, whenever you get it, like we discussed when we were talking about that invocation, we're like, well, in that case, then it's time to put all kinds of crazy, weird stuff in your game where people are actually vampires and werewolves and
people that they knew for a long time, like NPCs, like, oh my god.
Bob the Merchant is actually Bob the Beholder. Who knew?
Yeah. That guy's got an intellect devourer in his head.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that just freak him out. Yeah.
So there's two ways of doing it as a DM. One is like, and I feel like this is a natural instinct for a lot of GMs. Whether it's, I don't know if it's like an old school mentality or if it's an experienced thing, but where you're like, you see it as a problem that's going to make things harder to do in the games when you're trying to pull things off.
Right.
Or you can lean into it and be like, oh no. And like, you can make it the player's problem instead because they find that they're walking down the street and, the guy that accidentally bumped into them and very nonchalantly, oh, excuse me, and they keep going, and it was a freaking dragon, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially if they're not that high level, right? Because you could really mess
Yeah.
with them, right? Like, what are they going to do? Oh, that was a pit fiend.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And a good example of why it's not necessarily like bad to give like powerful items for low level characters, because it's like, well, they could get themselves into much hotter water than they can handle if they are thinking like, I got this thing, like that, like oh man, it's a drought, let's follow it, or like let's go, rob him or something. It's like, okay,
Yeah. So yeah, there's two different, like I said, two different ways to do it. Like you lean into it, or you think of it as a constant problem to overcome, which is like a losing battle. Because then you're gonna end up doing something cheesy like stealing it or breaking it, or because it becomes this like point of contention for you all the time.
It's a good example. It's not a D&D example, but it made me think, especially a Dynamancer Phelps, that like he should be seeing ethereal eels and things like that. It reminds me of Moon Rises with my character, and how like I had a sort of like weird like mental powers, and like I could observe from afar, and you just made it more awesome for me of like having like there was stuff like that, like, oh, I don't want to go that, like there was other entities out there, like, oh boy, like yeah, let's retreat and stuff. It made it really cool. I was just bragging to a friend of mine the other day about that game. Actually, I was like, oh man, this character was so cool. And
Maybe it's going to require some insanity checks.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Brian Smith commenting on my shirt. I actually didn't plan that. I just grabbed a shirt out of my pile of clothes.
You're just that good.
Yeah. It was my foresight.
Mm-hmm.
Kicking in, yeah, for sure. But going back to the idea of implementing sight or extra sight, that might actually be a cool thing to do for an encounter, a session where the players either giving something, take something that does kind of like open their third eye and gives them a version of true sight for a while. It almost makes you think of the out of the box encounter the argument where basically like the players are being slipped truth serum over the course of a meal, so they keep they can't lie and have to tell the truth. But like the whole idea, the same premise though, is like all of a sudden they can see things that they couldn't see before. Almost like, it's a great example. What is it? What was the movie? With Roddy Piper.
Oh, They Live.
They Live, right? When they get the sunglasses.
Yeah.
And they can see what's actually going on, and they can see the aliens.
Yeah, for sure.
You can have your moment.
Yeah.
I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum moment.
Yeah, right on. That is cool. Yeah, see, it's often more fun. That's something I've learned from you guys a lot too, and just over the years of like, just lean into things and see where they go, because like, especially if it's things that the players are excited about and think they're cool, it's like, all right, we'll just build on that then. I mean, get weird with it, like you were saying, and then
yeah,
come up with some cool stuff, and who knows what they'll do in reaction to that when they find out, like, like we mentioned earlier, like when we started, that is like things related to like intrigue and people in disguise. That's like, well, maybe you realize like the intrigue is much larger than they even suspect. Like, oh my god, like that guy's not what he seems to, and neither are they. Or there's like an arcane eye watching you. Sometimes it like other NPCs can cast those spells too, right? It's just like they have it in Critical Role. They got super paranoid. Like every time they were alone, they're like, "I'm going to cast True Sight," and just like, "Is there any arcane eyes around here watching us?"
That's super specific.
Because there was like one time, I think. I mean, and who knows? Matt might have just done the same thing. Where like, if a player casts, I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like, yeah, you see a
translucent glowing eye in the air above you.
Yeah, just because he wasn't I think he just did it because it was a new feature that he got. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do that, and it was like, oh my god, what? Like there is something watching us or scrying and stuff. That's cool.
Of course. So Brian's talking about the common trip of wizards seeing through their familiars, rat vision, You know that I don't know why, but as soon as he put that, that just made me think about, and I think I'm going to do it the next time there's a game. Whatever the wizard wants their familiar to do, it's going to make a side trip either before or after to a kitchen, and you're like,
Okay.
and they're going to have to negotiate with their familiar to get them to leave the kitchen.
Okay.
You just find you find yourself staring at a cupboard.
Oh, yeah, when they're seeing through it.
Yeah.
That's funny. So in addition to things, like your visual acuity, like I also, one of the big things I thought of was like the sights that characters see, which is like, I love that kind of stuff. And as somebody who's GM'd for me many a time, I'm sure you can attest, like I ask a lot of questions about like, what do I see? Like, does it look like this? Is there this around me? Because like, that's a big part of gaming for me. And, when I'm the GM, I often describe things because it's like, I just love that kind of fantastical landscapes and things that you see. And really, like I say all the time, just like selling that sizzle of like, what does it look like?
You do a really great job of that. And so does Robin when Robin runs as well. I think the two of you really shine at that aspect of the game.
Oh, thanks.
And then so because in the Bastards games though, they took us to a lot of like exotic locations.
Yeah, and I could really picture them, like a castle made of glass, like rising out of the desert and things like that. Yeah, and it just, to me, I think it's a kind of a DM tip too, in the sense of like, well, that can help make things that seem like challenging to, or like not as exciting encounters. Like people say giants all the, like, oh, they're just big sacks of hit points and stuff. It's like, well, make them seem scary, like what does it look like when this thing's just like, its club is coming at you and it's like bigger than you, or like, it clubs, some your NPC friends like just shatters it out from under him and he goes flying and stuff like that.
That, or have them like pick up a character and yeet them.
Yeah, right.
Like stuff like that rarely gets done, but like, what are the boners are like 50 pounds that they use as weapons, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So I would say
it actually seems small, doesn't it? Because I'm thinking of like going to the gym. It's like a 50-pound weight. I mean, sure, it's iron, but it's like a rock wouldn't be that much bigger than like a, right?
Yeah, that does seem.
Yeah, I would think like a 500-pound rock would seem more like if a giant could palm it and just carry them around, like several of them in a sack. Like 50, unless maybe I don't know. Maybe it's just like it would like a 50-pound rock would be like a.
I guess like a 50-pound dumbbell is like this, right?
Which is about as big as
I mean, if you turn that into a sphere, that's a decent sized rock. But I don't know.
For a giant though, like what does it do? Like throw? I mean, it would. Yeah,
that's true. Plucks it.
yeah, it just puts that in like ting 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 ting. It'd be like a sling bullet for a giant.
Or have the giant scoop up one of the characters and throw them into the air so they can like pitch to themselves.
Yeah. One of the best things that I find that I do for all the games I play, like characters and DM, is make a Pinterest board, because that's all about fantastical sites, and it's cool to like because whether I'm like exploring a new area, or like I ran like didn't last very long, but like an Arctic type campaign. It's just like, you get tons of awesome ideas of, like, even that one video, I think it was a Monster BFF, it was like the Burr Hag and Salamander.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And Jake, or I think the thumbnail had like a picture of, and I think it's from the Bolus Guide or wherever Burr Hags are from, but it's like a snowy mountain, but the top looks like a skull, and that's where like the hag's lair was, kind of in the art and stuff. And it's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Like, see that from afar through the snow, like describe it to the players, the vistas.
Well, actually, you bring up the Burr Hag, and speaking of sights to see, you're like, one of their abilities is right where they can see somebody, right? And it's horrific. And then like, I forget what the effect is, but it's brutal, right?
It is brutal. you're horrified. In fact, years ago, there was a con that it was funny. Like like a bunch of people we knew were going to go, but then like none of those people went. And I was going to run a game for you guys and WebDM.
Uh-huh.
And it was shortly after that book came out, and I worked like on this adventure, and I wanted to use the Burhag because I thought that was cool, and I was like, man, her ability is so cool. So the setup for the adventure was like you were like guarding a caravan of bringing resources to a snowy, remote snowy place. There was like a huge snowstorm caused by the hag that caused like the whole caravan to like pitch over a cliff. And it had been really hard. So you started the adventure with, I think, a level of exhaustion. And when you come to exploring like the ruined caravan, you would see the hag eating one of the people. And I did the whole premise was just because I was like, I want to use that ability. And it's so specific, and I was like, and I don't want everybody just easily make the save. So I was like, if they're exhausted, they'll have disadvantage. I'm like, somebody's gonna be affected by that.
I did an adventure where it was the company in Ag mercenaries, and they did a job someplace, and they're about to get snowed in this valley because something happens, and they couldn't, and they should have had more time, but they didn't. So they go to investigate what's happening, and I used abominable yetis, and then after they defeat the yetis and they do some other things, like we kind of ran out of time, but it was a good enough spot to end the adventure. And it was one of the fan games, but one of the players in the fan game was also doing the coaching with us, and he's like, hey, can we finish this, and just use my coaching, for the session? I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And we did. And
that's cool.
It was a Burhag that was behind everything. And they had a cage made of ice with commoners in it. And the first thing they do, as soon as the players get there, is they use their maddening feast ability, which is, so they just murder somebody in front of them, a commoner, and then use this ability.
Nice.
Which the hag feasts on the corpse of one enemy within 5 feet of her that died within the past minute. Each creature of the hag's choice within 60 feet of her and able to see must make a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw or be frightened of her for 1 minute. While frightened in this way, a creature is incapacitated, can't understand what others say, can't read, and speaks only in gibberish. The DM controls the creature's movement, which is erratic. A creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of their turns. So basically, you just go insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's such a great. I mean, I guess I'm a bit squeamish, so I don't like it, but that doesn't bother me actually. Thinking about this particular thing, but I mean, talk about a sight to see. It's like I wouldn't describe it in great detail, but yeah, that's just that feature, that action alone. I was like, man, that was like the whole. And you had just done that video too, so I was basically basing it off that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so horrifying, and that's why I was like, I want somebody to be affected by it. So I was like, if they're exhausted, and and that's what one of the things I've in the last couple of months just been thinking a lot about. It's just how much you your setup as the DM, over the years I've mentioned well, I don't like the minute to minute style of D&D where every second is accounted for, you know what I mean? I don't like to play like that. And as a DM, it's fun. I mean, even between sessions, you can just set the stage however you like. So that just felt that had, it's they're, not only in the scenario I pitched, because I wanted that ability to work, but I was like, well, that seems pretty exciting, right? It's you're exhausted, people died, you don't know where you are now, and all you know is that this Burhag, and I figured she would probably just try to get away, which Burhags could pretty easily, I think.
They do have that flying.
Yeah, the broom of flying, yes, right. And I was and then they'll probably hunt her down. Of course, who knows what have happened from there, but that was the basic premise. Do you think that would have been fun? And I just, with the frost sound, it was awesome. Combo. Where was that though?
Why was what?
Is there something the Frost Salamander did that like recharged something the hag did or something along those lines?
I forget why we combined those two. I think it's been a couple years since we did that video.
Yeah, that's true. If I can't remember, I'm sure you.
Forget about it. So Dynamancer, we had a hag last week who was chopping off troll hands and creating an army of hairy hands. I'm just envisioning like this.
Troll's just like, help me. Mm-hmm. Well, the hag. Uh-oh, people are saying we went mute.
I'm not sure what happened. Is the sound back now?
I don't know.
I don't know. It's showing the sound on everything here.
Yeah. It's like multiple people.
So I don't know what you heard or what you didn't hear. So
yeah.
But no, the idea, like, even better than like having it be a hag, like have it be the town's butcher that somehow is luring trolls into his into the butcher shop and capturing them.
They're saying it's just you. No, it's back, Brian. Yeah, okay, we got it. All right. What is this person's purpose of doing that? You think? Oh, this was from Dynamancer's game. He says,
I was just playing with that idea.
Sure. This is an Annis hag. What are they about? I don't know. I don't remember Annis. I mean, I remember the thing, but I don't remember like what they're.
It's just another one. I was just saying, what a cool idea that it was that you came up with. That that you're having people either attacked on the countryside, the town, villages, whatever, by these troll hands, and I just envisioned the adventurers bursting in on the hag's lair and finding this room with all these trolls, tied down to wooden chairs, but then they all just have bloody stumps because the hags are cutting them off. But I thought it'd be cooler if you remove the hag and make it more of a normal person that is somehow capturing trolls and doing it, and it's like the town's butcher or something.
Yeah, those are always fun things to play with. It's tough because it's like, well, there is so many cool monsters like a hag, but also has all these cool lore and magical powers. But sometimes it's like, yeah, but when it's just some scumbag like real person, that makes it kind of like more villainous in a way. It's like, well, I expect that from a hag, but not the town butcher. Jeez, what are you doing?
It also makes me think of I think it was a short story in a dragon magazine where I think 3 ogres capture kill and capture a troll, and they're like they have it all trussed up and on a spit, and they're just cleaving hunks of it off and eating it, and it ends with them not feeling very well. The trolls are regrowing in them.
Oh man, I just thought of a site themed story. So in one of my games a few years ago, they were just exploring like the countryside because it was sort of like a points of light type of game, they just like were in a town and they didn't know what was out there. And like I mentioned earlier, I made like a Pinterest board for the campaign, just like things to see, and I was just looking at it while they were in an area. And I described, I was like, they crested a hill and there was just like a big plains, with like swaying grass and like this huge tree off in the distance. I was like, and I mean like giant, because in the picture it was just fantasy art. It looked like it was, hundreds of feet tall, let's say. And they were like, oh wow, let's go check that out. I'm like, okay, they like checked across the plains and everything. And I remember while they were just talking and stuff, I was like, "Oh, I have an adventure." It was like in a kobold. It was in a Peculiar Towers, a kobold press. It's like a giant tree, but it's like all hollow, and there's I think it's like a Kenku gang that lives inside, or whatever the version of Kenku is. I forget. So I pulled that out, and I was like looking at it. I'm like, okay, there's like a hidden entrance on the bottom, like in the base of the tree, and it was like like redwood size, maybe bigger. Like they were searching around, and they rolled perception checks. They couldn't find that door. Went all the way around it for a long time. They're like, well, let's climb it. And then they had like an impromptu like tree climbing competition because they wanted to like race each other. So I just had them kept making athletics checks. I'm like, like if you I was like, just to be clear, like if you fall, like, and you're like 100 feet up, there's going to be a lot of damage because they were like third level. And they're like, yeah, it's cool. It's like, all right, cool. And they just kept going. And it was pretty exciting because it was like, somebody would like get 2 successes in a row and somebody would fail and then they'd fail and then they'd get 2. So, and they went all the way up and there was another entrance like because they had like a map and, it's like 200 feet up, like there's a big branch with the door, into the thing. So they just like got up in there and the Kenku gang sort of like confronted them. They're just like, what are you doing? Like they were watching the whole time. And the one character his name was Finn Hornraven, and his backstory, I just remember like he was like a noble and he had like drawn his family crest, which like had a raven on it and stuff. And like he showed them that just I don't know, because he thought it would be cool. And so I like came up with this thing of like, oh, they knew him. And we had this whole subplot that developed of like his family actually were shape changers back in the day or something like that. It went on for a while. But yeah, just based off describing what they saw, they just decided to go do that. So that was pretty cool.
So apparently, Dinomancer, you've been around for a while watching our videos, because the game you're talking about is Scott Garibay had run a Gamma World game for us, and he incorporated a lot of weird stuff into that game. Space Marines,
like you do.
Star Trek, Thundercats.
Yeah. I remember watching that.
I think he did a tavern, and it was nothing but Kurt Russell characters.
That's great. Well, I mean, Gamma World is supposed to be really weird, right?
Oh yeah. And for 4th edition, the Gamma World based off of 4th edition is actually a lot weirder. But I also felt like it had a better story.
Yeah.
How so? Well, so the premise behind 4th edition Gamma World was like they fired up the what is it called?
Hadron Collider?
That thing, yeah. And it caused all the different realities to merge.
Okay.
And come, kind of fade in and out of sync with each other. And that's why Gamma World is so weird and twisted.
Okay. I like that. Is that the version with like the cards that was based on 4th edition?
Yeah.
I think that's actually Gamma World 7th edition.
Well, welcome to the live chat, Dinomancer. Yeah, it's actually, I know a lot of people don't like 4th edition, except for you. You're the only I thought it was okay.
But a lot of people are like you. It's like they just wasn't like D&D. Like if it was another game, they'd have been like, "Yeah, cool." That's what you made D&D. Like,
the best way I can describe it for me was I was indifferent on
it.
Yeah. And
sure.
But I really did like the 4th edition rules, Gamma World based off of the 4th edition rules.
Yeah.
Now Ted never wanted to play it the way it's meant to be played, where you're just supposed to randomly roll and it's just supposed to be kooky.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can really do some broken combinations, especially if you.
You mean with your characters?
Yeah, if you pick and choose the way things combine. But I thought it was I liked it for 2 reasons. One, you could make like some crazy combinations that were just weird and wacky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't you have like a guy in a wheelchair that was like a ghost or something like that?
Yeah, so like two of the types were, one of them was wheeled, and one of them I think was like ectoplasm or ecto something or other, but basically you're a ghost. So I went with the wheeled, ecto, which basically made Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
But it was like a guy in a wheelchair that died and just came back as a ghost, and like the wheelchair was just kind of part of him. So
Yeah, sure. That's cool. As a DM, I was trying to think, and I don't know either way, but like, where do you fall on like, asking players to like contribute to like painting a scene? Like Brian Cowan does that real well. Is we just played with him over the Troll Bridge a couple weeks ago. Of just, or just like when people, I think you do it like, and I like this too. It's like when people ask a question, to be like, "Is there this in the room?" Or like,
yeah. So
yeah, what do you think it looks like? That sort of stuff.
I kind of do my descriptions in, I want to say like tiers. Like,
okay.
First I start like real broad,
mm-hmm.
and then I give the players a chance to kind of interact, ask questions, and then from there we like fill it in a little bit more. And then also it is fun to also give the players agency to do things in the games as well. A good example of that is if they're going to a city and it's the first time the city's appeared in the game, but you might ask your players, "Hey, have any of you been here before?"
Oh yeah, that's a
and
good
then
idea.
if they're like, if someone says yes, and they're like, "Well, we want to go find a tavern," and I'm like, then you go, "Well, what is your favorite tavern?" Right? And then you can let them, fill in some of the details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh gosh, it was so funny. What was it? I think it was in. Well, this doesn't have to do much with sight. Just something you said reminded me. It was like a Stevens recent video about hit points.
Yeah.
And I guess it was sort of has to do with sight of just like, to get this video is basically about that weird place where it's just like, well, they're not supposed to be you getting hit, but everybody just kind of treats them like that anyway, sort of conundrum, which I attest as having the worst named mechanic ever, if that is the case, because they're called hit points. So it's like, well, you just assume that you're being hit. But he is saying like, maybe a way around that would be to like, ask the players like, well, what does it look like when this attack is successful against you, sort of thing. If I give players a chance to describe, not just being hit, like, oh, it's like it takes a lot out of me, but I just like managed to glance it off my shield or something, but it's like really tiring. And so we had been talking about it, and I was just like, I mentioned, I was like, well, we kind of do that anyway in our Tuesday group. We just take it upon ourselves to often describe things that,
stuff like that's cool, but also like if you think the D&D combat takes a long time.
Yes, that's what I said.
The more you get into that stuff, the longer it gets, which is fine. Like if you're as a group enjoying the game, it doesn't really matter.
I did mention, because that came up in our conversation. I said like, well, if you're the kind of group who like fight, just is like, more traditional, like we fight a lot, just clear out rooms, you probably don't care about the abstraction quality of that anyway. So it's probably moot for them. Like, well, am I really being hit, or whatever? It's like, I don't know. It's just numbers you're crunching on your character sheet.
Well, and the natural inclination is for people to want to describe, especially GMs, when to subscribe, like you just got hit by 3 arrows, or slashed across your thigh, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have time for this question, Dynamaster.
Oh, geez, boy, it's that late already. Wow.
Yeah, what's your most batshit crazy game you've ever played in? I will say, any of the games on the channel that you find that Scott ran, he just runs a gonzo game that are just tend to be over the top. I think even if he doesn't intend it to be that way, that's just how Scott rolls, and they were crazier games. Right off the bat, I would have to say like that Gamma World game was kind of bonkers, but also he ran a Nerdarchy Saves the World game.
Oh, that was a great one.
Which was like a modern one where we played ourselves, and the worlds of D&D collide with the real world, and I think we had to stop an evil wizard or something. And the ending
I can answer this one.
Crazy.
I can answer this one pretty quick too. Most batshit crazy game I've ever played in, I'd have to say Moonrises because it was just super fun and they had that same kind of kooky quality that I love. And there were so many different themes and elements going on, but they all just went together in a just wonderful melange that I enjoyed. You can watch that on I think that's on the Nerdarchy Live channel.
It is.
And
We
most,
lost some of the sessions, those, but
yeah,
unfortunately.
not in here or here. But the most batshit crazy game I've ever ran, I gotta say in Just Quest 2, because I just like really just was like, okay, this game's just wild and crazy, and you guys went and met yourselves, the players, and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, we went beyond breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
There's that. Well, with that, it is that time. We're over by a bit, but until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.